Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about injuries. This was one of the things that was asked about a lot on the thread from last week. I think it was about a week and a half ago, maybe last Monday-ish. With injuries, a couple things I want to talk about right off the bat. So it seems that when we look at injuries, whether we're powerlifters or bodybuilders or whatever it is, we kind of have two extremes. And don't get me wrong, there's people that are pretty sensible that fall right in the center and use some logic and figure things out. But we have two extremes a lot of the time. We have the one side that is, I don't care if I'm hurt, I'm going to keep doing it. I might even just keep doing the same exact thing that hurt me in the first place. We have those people, all right? Probably not very, well, it's definitely not very intelligent to do that. No real good is going to come of that. We know this, okay? And then we have the other side they stub their toe and they can't train for a week. Gotten this in emails. I'm not singling anyone out, but I've gotten this question. I've gotten this question from clients. You know, Coach, or Austin, I don't know. It could be anything. I tweaked my knee yesterday, walking out to my truck. All right, so it's a little bit of swelling. It's pretty achy. Do you think I should take the week off from training? You take the week off from training? I'm like, well, no. I mean, there's a lot of other muscles you can train besides your quads, the hamstrings, and calves. I mean, and even in that regard, you can probably isolate those things a little bit with very little knee involvement. So no, that's kind of a silly question. That's one of the things that I get asked too is, how do you determine whether you should train with an injury or not? Well, I can say there's going to be people with a lot more experience than me, have had a lot more injuries. I've had my fair share of injuries, most of them, pretty much all of them unrelated to bodybuilding. But, I was obviously bodybuilding during them, so had to figure out how to work around them. But certain things like longer term injuries, ligaments, for example, had this wrist, ligament repair in this wrist, had ligament repairs in my knees, stuff like that. I mean, that puts you out for a while. Ligaments take forever to heal. It's definitely try to train the areas around them as much as possible, so you aren't completely detraining the area and creating further imbalance. So, like with the wrist, for example, I use those. I think they're called like isolator straps. Some people probably remember those isolator straps here. You could do biceps, triceps. You could hook them into elbow joints and do chest movements. You can hook ab slings to the elbows and do pull down movements. So a lot of things that you could do to work around it. Had to be crafty, had to be creative. But the reason that I would want to do something like that is simply because I don't want to lose all my muscle tissue. A lot of it comes back quick. And I did lose fullness even training. Like I probably lost a little bit of tissue. But it was so much easier to regain it and get back to my starting point and ahead of that after I was fully cleared than had I just completely stopped training. And some people can stop training. Hey, some people, they were going to bounce back a lot quicker than others. A lot of us, we've worked way too hard and long to let that muscle go. Yes, it will come back. Yes, muscle memory has some merit, but that doesn't mean we want to lose all that time. So there's sensible things you can do to work around it. So yeah, you can definitely long-term injuries. You don't want to completely detrain the area. Sometimes things get injured because the area is weak to begin with. And then you might have a low back injury because your hams and glutes are weak. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want you to stop placing any tension on those areas because it kind of relieves the pain temporarily, but you're creating further imbalance by making those areas weaker and you're not supporting the joint with the musculature around the area. So a great example would be, and I'm using myself again because it's the easiest thing to do, but when I had knees, like I have torn cartilage in both knees. Okay. So I've had one knee, the right knee, done already. They did a meniscus repair. Meniscus, a lot of time they go in and they clip it out and they might scrape some shit out of there, scope it or whatever. it's pretty easy to recover from. But thing is, they keep scraping all your cartilage out. They keep going in there. It gets worse, gets harder to recover from, and you end up with no cartilage. You end up with arthritis. Well, may end up with arthritis anyhow, eventually, someday. But doctor even told me, don't even worry about it if it doesn't hurt. Build up the muscle around the area as much as you possibly can. That's the thing about any joint. The joints themselves do not move themselves. The joint is moved by the musculature around the area. Your elbow, inside the elbow doesn't have muscle. It's not, or not anything substantial like your tricep or like your, forearms. So try to make those areas strong while not injuring the joint. And that's going to help support the joint. And then part of that too is making sure that you're placing proper tension on the area when you train. So you have the people that they preach the super high rep training or the super slow training or whatever it is, because it's not placing heavy loads on your joints and it's targeting the muscles. That's great. I think from a longevity standpoint, obviously makes sense. Now, is that maximizing hypertrophy for you in the long term or helping you get the strongest you can? Probably not. Now, that's not to say that you can't train with heavy progressive loads and still not hurt yourself all the time. It's again, making sure that you're placing tension on the area. It's important. And you can't always prevent everything. Shit happens sometimes. It's not, no matter how much warm-up work you do and how flexible you are and how mobile you are, and it doesn't matter. I mean, stuff can happen. But you can train intelligently and place tension on the area and be sensible. And then if you do get hurt, try to keep training in a way that's going to help you maintain the musculature in that area, at least while it's injured. So with that too, we look at a couple different types of injuries when in this industry. I mean, one of the big ones is probably just overuse injuries. Stuff like tendonitis in the elbows, for example, it hurts when you bench press, right? So a lot of the overuse injuries are just inflammation. Maybe you're moving through the range of motion incorrectly and you're just beating the area up over and over and over and over and over again. And you might be able to just correct that simply through correcting the movement itself. Now, temporarily, you might want to stop doing the movement and do something else that doesn't hurt to let the inflammation go down. But you might want to get with someone that is a movement specialist that can look at it and figure out why is this movement wrong? What am I doing wrong in this movement? Maybe it's just biomechanically, the movement doesn't suit you very well. And yeah, that happens. You don't have to do the movement. You don't have to do any particular movement. But that doesn't mean just because something doesn't feel good that you have to scrap it. There might be a better way to do it or an alternative variation or something. So, and there are a million and one ways to work any muscle. If you're a powerlifter, obviously you have your big three. You have to do those. But, in bodybuilding, a little bit different story. So with that, overuse injuries, trying to reduce the inflammation too through your diet, making sure you have a good fatty acid profile and you're not eating a lot of inflammatory foods, other supplementation that can help lower inflammation, systematic enzymes, curcumin, your omega-3 supplementation, and there are a lot of 5-LOX type supplements. I think that's the proper terminology. Help with inflammation. I'm not going to go into all the supplements, but my point is supplementation can be helpful as well. So yeah, overuse injuries, really common. Even do something like, and there might even be an issue like when you're letting the inflammation heal. Sometimes I'll recommend stuff like BFR training, greatly reduce the load. You're still getting a pretty good amount of benefit in the area. BFR training has been used for injuries. That's one of the things that it's used for. Using tempo training, super slow training or whatever you want to call it, that can be helpful, placing more tension on the muscle, relieving the joints, at least temporarily reducing your loads while you train. So a lot of stuff you can do there. But if I would, again, try to find the root of the issue, talk to somebody that can look at a video of your exercises perhaps, or walk you through a consultation. If you want me to recommend somebody, I know some people that can help. So don't hesitate to ask. And other injuries, you know, like we're not gonna talk about broken bones. Obviously, yeah, break a bone, you know, you gotta wear a cast probably. So that is what it is. Bones heal pretty quick though, usually. More major injuries, I've already mentioned those. I talked about ligaments specifically, but if you have other injuries that perhaps require surgical intervention, yeah, I do suggest following your physical therapy regimen and trying to be as diligent as you possibly can to regain range of motion, regain strength, and keep training other things while you're hung up. I mean, a great example is we have a study now, or studies, there might be more than one, I know at least of one, that shows training one side can help with strength on the other side. So I mean, if one side's injured, train the other side. I mean, you can still train, do the best you can. And there's people that roll into the gym in wheelchairs and train upper body, whatever you got to do, you know. So it's going to be probably better to keep training. If you're just a lazy ass and that's just your nature, then I guess, hey, it is what it is. But you can definitely work around it and probably prevent a good amount of atrophy and save yourself a hell of a lot of work and time to come back. I think the last thing I probably want to say is that don't be married to a certain way of training or certain movements. Like I think I mentioned earlier in the video, yeah, if you're powerlifting, you have your big 3 movements. You might have to modify your accessory movements. You might have to modify the way you program the movements in. But in terms of bodybuilding, I mean, I just don't like the idea of being married to certain movements if they're hurting you, if you can't, get them down or whatever. Same thing with training. You don't have to be married to a certain style of training even. So it happens all the time when people get injured. They freak out. Why do they freak out? Well, they might freak out about the injury, yes, but they also freak out because, oh my gosh, my coach wrote me this program. Now I can't do everything that's on the program, or I have this program written myself. I can't do everything that's on it. It's like, modify it. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this movement. You don't have to do this movement. Like I said, I mean, there's so many 1,000,001 ways that you can do a movement, 1,000,001 ways that you can hit a certain muscle group. There's countless angles. There's countless ways you can do it. I mean, even something simple, like you think about how simple training is in general, like not necessarily programming it, but the exercises themselves. Yeah, there are tons of little cues within an exercise that can help with its execution. But if you think about the actual planes of motion that we use for certain muscles, like our back, for example, there is pulling movements, right, that do a rector's posterior chain, and then there's rowing movements and some pull down movements. So there's like 3. We have vertical, horizontal, and pulling, and that's it mainly. You can pull your elbows back past your sides about 100 different ways, so you don't have to be stuck on one way of doing things, is my point. So don't get hung up on that. Probably prevent further injuries and probably have a lot more productive training if you can, wrap your mind around it in that way. So that is it for injuries. If you guys do have injuries, seek a professional's help. Hopefully this gives you some tips on working around it in the meantime and not being a pansy. Hopefully.